The shovel hit something hard. Marcus Reed stopped moving. For a moment, the only sound was the dry grass brushing against the fence and the slow creak of an old windmill turning somewhere behind him. He looked down at the hole. The ground was supposed to be empty. That was what everyone had told him. 40 acres of useless dirt. 40 acres that had been sitting untouched for more than a decade. But something had just struck the blade of his shovel. Marcus was a 38-year-old black farmer from eastern Kansas, a quiet man with broad shoulders, dark brown skin, short black hair, and a faded blue work shirt that had been washed so many times the color was almost gone. He had spent most of his life around farms. His father had taught him how to repair engines before he was old enough to drive. His mother had taught him something different. Never waste what still has a purpose. Marcus had carried both lessons for years. Now he stood alone on land people had called worthless. He pushed the shovel into the dirt again. Clang! There it was. Marcus crouched and pushed the loose soil aside with his fingers. A thin piece of black metal appeared. He stared at it. Then he heard an engine. A pickup truck rolled slowly along the county road. Marcus looked up. 2 men were sitting inside. They had watched him buy the property 6 months earlier. They had laughed when he told them he planned to farm it. One of them had even asked if Marcus planned to grow rocks. The truck stopped near the fence. A window rolled down. "You find gold yet?" the driver called. Marcus stood. He wiped dirt across his jeans. "No," the man laughed. "Keep digging." The truck pulled away. Marcus watched the dust disappear. Then he looked back at the hole. His father had owned this land once. That was the part Marcus had never told anyone. His father, Daniel Reed, had bought the property in 1987. But after a series of bad harvests, a broken irrigation system, and years of debt, Daniel had eventually walked away. Marcus had been 12 years old when it happened. He remembered standing beside his father in the kitchen that night. Daniel had placed an old brown notebook on the table. He had written only a few words inside. "Some land remembers." Marcus had never understood what that meant. Years later, when Daniel died, Marcus found the notebook again. Most of the pages were empty, but one page had a hand-drawn map. There was no road, no property line, only one mark, a small circle near the center of the 40 acres. Marcus had spent months searching county records. Then he found the property. The land was still for sale. Nobody wanted it. Marcus used nearly everything he had saved. His sister told him he was taking a huge risk. His friends told him he was chasing a memory. Even the bank officer looked at him strangely. But Marcus bought it, and now he was standing over the exact place marked in his father's notebook. He knelt again. The metal object was larger than he expected. He dug around it carefully. Soon, the top of an old metal box appeared beneath the dirt. Marcus stopped. His breathing changed. He reached for the box. It wouldn't move. Something was holding it down. He looked at the shovel, then at the fading sunlight. He could leave it until morning. He almost did. Then his eyes fell on the old brown notebook sitting beside his truck. He walked over and picked it up. The wind lifted several pages. One page opened by itself. There was the same circle, and beneath it, in his father's handwriting, were 4 words Marcus had never noticed before. "Don't dig too deep." Marcus stared at the sentence, then slowly looked back at the hole. He had already dug deep enough to find the box. Now he had to decide whether to open it. And somewhere beneath that dry field, something was waiting. Marcus returned before sunrise. The sky was still gray when he parked his old Ford beside the fence. He carried 2 things with him, a flashlight and his father's notebook. The box was still where he had left it. Marcus knelt beside the hole. He touched the metal, cold, rusted, heavy. He worked the shovel underneath one edge and pushed. The box shifted, a few inches. Something cracked beneath it. Marcus stopped. He listened. Nothing. He pushed again. The box came loose. Marcus dragged it into the morning light. It was smaller than a suitcase and covered with rust. There was no lock, just a thick metal latch. He lifted it. The lid opened with a sharp squeal. Inside was an old glass jar wrapped in cloth. Beside it sat several folded papers. Marcus picked up the papers first. The top one was a hand-drawn map of the farm. His father's handwriting covered the edges. Marcus followed one sentence with his finger. Water was here before the drought. He looked across the field. There was nothing, just dry grass. He unfolded another page. It was a photograph. His father stood beside a younger man Marcus didn't recognize. Behind them was the same barn, but in the photograph, the field was green. Marcus turned the picture over. A date had been written on the back, May 1991. Then another sentence. They said it couldn't last. Marcus sat quietly. He remembered his father's stories. Daniel had once talked about water under the farm. But whenever Marcus asked about it, his father changed the subject. Now Marcus understood why. Someone had known. Someone had tried to hide it. But why? Marcus spent the next week studying the property. He walked the land with a metal rod. He checked the soil. He searched old county records. He found references to a shallow well from the 1950s. Then nothing. No well appeared on modern maps. No irrigation permit existed. The record simply stopped. Marcus became obsessed. Not with getting rich. Not with proving the neighbors wrong. He wanted to understand why his father had abandoned something he had clearly believed in. One afternoon, Marcus noticed something strange near the collapsed barn. A line of stones ran beneath the weeds. He cleared them with his boot. They formed a narrow path. The path ended at an old concrete slab. Marcus brushed dirt away. Underneath was a rusted metal pipe. He stared at it, then smiled for the first time in days. He called his friend Ray. Ray arrived an hour later with a wrench and a pressure gauge. The two men worked until sunset. They connected the gauge. Nothing happened. Ray shook his head. Could be dead. Marcus stared at the pipe. Maybe. They waited. Nothing. Ray packed his tools. Marcus, your dad may have been wrong. Marcus didn't answer. After Ray left, Marcus remained beside the pipe. The sun dropped behind the trees. He remembered being 12. His father standing in the kitchen, the notebook, the words, "Some land remembers." Marcus looked at the pipe again. Then he noticed a small crack in the concrete. Water was collecting inside it. Just a few drops. He touched one with his finger. It was cold. Marcus stood completely still. He called Ray back. "Come tomorrow." "What happened?" "I think we missed something." The next morning, they opened the concrete. Underneath was an old channel leading downhill. It had been sealed with layers of mud and broken stone. They cleared the first section, then the second, then the third. But suddenly the channel collapsed. A wall of dirt dropped into the opening. Ray stepped back. Marcus stared at the blockage. The water had disappeared. Again, for 2 days they dug. Nothing. The farm remained dry. The neighbors noticed. Soon the jokes returned. One man stopped by the fence. "Still looking for your underground river?" Marcus kept working. The man laughed. "You bought 40 acres of dirt, Marcus." Marcus lifted his eyes. "Maybe." Then he looked down at the old channel. But dirt isn't always empty. That night, Marcus opened his father's notebook again. A loose page fell from the back. He picked it up. There was a sentence written in darker ink. "If they ever block the water again, start where the barn casts its shadow at noon." Marcus looked toward the barn. For the first time he wondered who they were. At noon the next day, Marcus stood beside the collapsed barn. The sun was directly overhead. The barn's broken wall cast a thin shadow across the ground. Marcus followed it. It ended near a large flat stone. He moved the stone. Underneath was another pipe. This one was newer. Marcus called Ray. They dug around it. 6 feet down, they found a valve. It was still connected to something beneath the field. Ray stared at it. "This isn't from your dad's time." Marcus looked at the rusted handle. "Then who put it here?" Neither man answered. They turned the valve. Nothing happened. Ray tried again. The handle broke. Marcus sat back on his heels. Another failure. But beneath the broken valve, they heard something. A low rushing sound. Water. Marcus froze. Ray put his ear to the pipe. There. They both heard it. Water was moving underground. Not much. But it was moving. The problem was that the pipe had been blocked. They spent 3 days clearing it. Every time they made progress, another section collapsed. The work was slow. The heat was brutal. Marcus's hands became raw. His shoulders ached. His old pickup started leaking oil. Then his tractor stopped working. The repair cost nearly $800. Marcus stared at the bill that night. His savings were almost gone. He sat alone at the kitchen table. The old notebook was beside him. For the first time, he considered selling the property. He could still recover some of his money. Maybe not all of it, but enough to start again somewhere else. His sister called. "You don't have to prove anything to Dad." Marcus looked toward the window. "I know. Then why are you still doing this?" Marcus was quiet, because the answer was not about money. It was about the 12-year-old boy who had watched his father leave the farm. It was about the questions that had followed him for 26 years. Finally, Marcus said, "I just want to know why he gave up." His sister didn't answer. She only said, "Then find out." The next morning, Marcus returned to the field. He found Ray waiting, but Ray had brought someone else, an older woman named Evelyn Carter. She had worked for the county water office in the 1990s. She looked at the old pipe, then at the barn, then at Marcus. "I remember this place," she said. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "What happened here?" Evelyn hesitated. "Your father found something." Marcus waited. "He found an underground spring." Ray looked at her. "How big?" Evelyn shook her head. "Big enough to keep this farm alive." Marcus looked toward the field. "Then why did he leave?" Evelyn lowered her eyes. "Because someone diverted the water." "Who?" "I never found out." Marcus stepped closer. "Someone?" She nodded. "There was pressure to shut the project down. The county said the water source wasn't reliable." "But it was." Evelyn looked directly at him. "Yes." She handed Marcus a folded document. It was a survey from 1991. A blue line ran beneath the entire property. At the center was a marked chamber. The spring wasn't a small underground pocket. It was connected to an old natural water system. Marcus looked at the map. Then he saw the final note. "Access sealed by private request." No name, no explanation. Marcus felt anger rise inside him. His father hadn't simply failed. Something had happened. That evening, Marcus and Ray returned to the field. They dug near the marked chamber. 20 feet down, the soil became dark, then wet. Marcus pushed his fingers into it. Cold water seeped through. Ray smiled. "We found it." Marcus didn't smile, because the water wasn't rising. It was flowing sideways, toward the old property line. Someone had built a concrete diversion wall underground, and it was still working. The water that belonged beneath Marcus's 40 acres was being redirected away. He stared at the wall, then at the empty fields around him. For years, the land had not been dead. It had simply been starved. Marcus stood up. "We're going to open it." Ray looked at the size of the concrete barrier. "That could take weeks." Marcus picked up the shovel. "Then we have weeks." The work changed Marcus. Every morning began before sunrise. He dug until his hands hurt. Ray repaired tools. Evelyn brought old records. Marcus's sister started bringing food. Little by little, the farm became less lonely. But the wall was stronger than they expected. It had been reinforced with steel. Whoever built it had wanted the water to stay where it was. For nearly a month, they worked. Then the county arrived. A truck stopped beside the field. 2 officials walked toward Marcus. One carried a folder. "You can't continue excavation without approval." Marcus wiped dirt from his hands. "I own this property." "You do." The official opened the folder. "But underground water rights are more complicated." Marcus looked at the papers. The old survey was inside. "So who owns the water?" The man hesitated. "We need to determine that." Marcus understood. The system was becoming the enemy now. Not a person, not a villain, just paperwork, rules, time, money, the things that could stop a man without ever raising their voice. The officials left with a warning. Marcus stood beside the hole. That night, he almost quit. Then his sister placed the old photograph on the kitchen table. She had found something behind it, a second photograph. Marcus turned it over. His father was standing beside the same spring chamber, but this time, there was a little boy beside him. Marcus, he barely remembered the day. His father had written underneath, "He will understand someday." Marcus stared at the words. Then he cried. Not loudly. He simply sat there with the photograph in his hands while the kitchen clock moved through the night. The next morning, he returned to the farm. This time, there were people waiting at the fence, neighbors, farmers, people who had laughed, One of them removed his hat. "Need another set of hands?" Marcus looked at him. The man nodded toward the hole. "Water could help all of us." Marcus stepped aside, then grabbed a shovel. For the first time, the work became a community effort. The concrete wall finally cracked on a Thursday afternoon. A thin stream of water burst through. Everyone stepped backward. The sound was small, almost nothing. Then the crack widened. Water rushed through the opening. Mud exploded across the trench. Ray shouted. Marcus stood frozen. The stream grew stronger. It filled the channel. It ran beneath the dry field. But then something went wrong. The water stopped. The entire field fell silent. Marcus looked at the channel. A second blockage had formed farther underground. The first wall had only been the beginning. The water was trapped again. Marcus closed his eyes. They had come so far, yet the land was still dry. Ray sat down. "We can't keep doing this forever." Marcus looked across the field. Then he noticed something. The old windmill had started turning. Slowly. The blades moved once, then again. Marcus walked toward it. There was water beneath the windmill. The underground pressure was changing. He remembered the original map. The blue line passed directly beneath the windmill. Marcus climbed the old platform. He found a rusted metal plate. Underneath it was a narrow access pipe. He opened it. Water pushed upward. Not enough for the farm, but enough to prove something. The system was alive. Marcus climbed down. He looked at the field, then at the people standing behind him. "We don't need to force the water." Ray frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus pointed toward the old channel. "We've been fighting it." He picked up his father's notebook. "The map shows the water moving downhill." He turned the page. "But Dad drew this wrong." Evelyn stepped closer. "Wrong how?" Marcus looked at the land. He didn't mark where the water was going. He pointed toward the far end of the property. He marked where it was supposed to come out. Everyone became quiet. Marcus grabbed the shovel and walked toward the lowest part of the field. There was one place they hadn't dug, one place his father had never marked. Marcus stopped, then drove the shovel into the ground. The first shovel went in easily. The second went deeper. By the 10th shovel, the soil had changed. Dark, cool, damp. Marcus dropped to his knees. He dug with both hands. A few inches below the surface, water began filling the hole. Ray stared. "No way." Marcus kept digging. The hole became a small pool. Then the water began rising faster. A thin stream escaped across the field. It moved slowly at first, then faster. The land seemed to breathe. Dry soil darkened. Cracked earth disappeared beneath a thin sheet of water. Everyone stood silent. Marcus looked toward the old barn. The same barn his father had stood beside 35 years earlier. The same land people had called worthless. But Marcus understood now. His father had not been wrong about the water. He had simply run out of time. The spring had never disappeared. It had been redirected, buried, forgotten, but not gone. Within weeks, Marcus planted his first small field. Not 40 acres, just 3. He didn't want to rush. The first green shoots appeared after a rainstorm. Marcus stood in the field before sunrise. His boots were wet. The plants moved gently in the wind. He touched one leaf, then smiled. A year earlier, people had laughed when he bought the land. Now some of those same people came to him for advice. Marcus never reminded them. He never asked for an apology. He simply showed them where the water was. The county eventually recognized the old survey. The water rights were settled. The spring became part of a shared irrigation system. Marcus kept his 40 acres, but he didn't turn them into some giant empire. He built slowly, a few crops, a small orchard, a repair shed. And beside the old barn, he restored a narrow wooden bench. It was the same place where his father had once sat. One evening, Marcus brought his father's notebook outside. The pages were soft from years of handling. He placed the notebook on the bench. Then he placed the old photograph beside it. For a long time, he said nothing. The wind moved through the field. Water ran quietly through the new irrigation channel. Marcus looked at the photograph. His younger self stood beside his father, a boy who had once believed his father had simply failed. Now he knew better. Sometimes people leave because they stop believing. Sometimes they leave because circumstances become stronger than hope. and sometimes the thing they were searching for is still there, just buried deeper than they could reach. Marcus closed the notebook. He looked across the 40 acres. The field was green now, not perfect. Some plants had died, some rows had failed. The old barn still needed repairs. His tractor still made a strange noise. There were bills waiting on the kitchen table. Life had not suddenly become easy, but the land was alive. That was enough. Marcus stood and walked toward the field. Halfway there, he stopped. He remembered the first morning, the shovel, the metal box, the warning in his father's handwriting. "Don't dig too deep." Marcus smiled. He finally understood what his father had meant. Maybe he hadn't been warning him to stop. Maybe he had been warning him that some answers were buried so deep that finding them would change the person doing the digging. Marcus looked back at the old barn, then toward the rising sun. The same ground people had called useless was shining with morning water. And the man they had laughed at was no longer trying to prove them wrong. He was simply building something his father had never been able to finish. Not a perfect farm, not a fortune, a future. Sometimes the ground doesn't need a miracle. Sometimes it only needs someone willing to dig one more hole. If this story stayed with you, remember that the things people call worthless are not always worthless. Sometimes they are simply waiting for someone patient enough to see what others missed.